Thank you so much. Thank you. And this morning, yes, I'm actually leaving the Tudors behind. My goodness, that doesn't happen very often, I can tell you. And this talk this morning, it's very much a sort of overview of the Norman conquest. Of course, the Tower will play a starring role as well, and also the personalities involved. Even though I'm mainly a Tudor historian, I've spent quite a lot of time with the Normans, in particular researching my biography of William the Conqueror's wife, Matilda, who I would argue is far more interesting than William himself and powerful. I also wrote a history of the Tower of London, which of course was formed in Norman times, and a full history of the monarchy. So I cover all of the Norman monarchs in that. But really, today I'm just focusing on the foundation of the Norman dynasty here in England. And it's a story based on multiple sources, but they're rather different to the sources that I've been used to working with in the Tudor period, when there's this embarrassment of riches in terms of state papers and ambassadorial reports and the like. There are written sources, of course, for the Norman period, but there are also pictorial sources, and the Bayeux Tapestry, of course, being perhaps the most famous of those. And by the way, this is what I found such a challenge when writing my biography of Matilda of Flanders, because it's a challenge anyway, finding out about Norman history, something that happened 1,000 years ago. There's a lot of chronicles, but they all tend to be quite biased. But finding out about women in the Norman period was really quite a challenge. If I tell you that the Bayeux Tapestry depicts 600 different men and 3 women, you get the sense, okay, of the bias of the sources. But by piecing together, references in chronicles, places, I did a lot of kind of walking the turf connected with the Norman conquest, and evidence such as the Bayeux Tapestry, I was able to, no pun intended, but weave a picture of the early Norman period, and in particular of Matilda. But I want to start really with William himself. So William the Conqueror, the founder of this mighty Anglo-Norman dynasty, he was one of the most unlikely kings of England ever, I think we can say. He had a fairly tortuous path to the throne. He became Duke of Normandy at the age of just 8, and he was illegitimate. So his father, Duke Robert, had a long-standing mistress, Helena, and didn't have any legitimate children. William was his eldest and crucially male, illegitimate heir. So he became Duke of Normandy. And he spent most of his childhood on the run from murderous and rapacious relatives who thought that they had a better claim to be Duke of Normandy than he did. This is Falaise, by the way, the place of William's birth, and where he spent a lot of his early years as Duke of Normandy. So it was a turbulent childhood, and one that sort of chiselled William into this fearsome warrior duke. So from a very young age, he was used to having to battle for his position, having to secure Normandy's borders. And in fact, he was more ambitious than just defending Normandy. He wanted to attack, he wanted to extend Normandy's borders. So he was a very ambitious, a very acquisitive ruler, which would become rather significant in his life. And his consort, Matilda, certainly added to his ambition. She helped to enhance William's status. So Matilda, she's a little known figure, I think, in history. There are many Matildas in this period. Can I just say, it's like the name Thomas in the Tudor period. You get lots of Matildas in Norman history, but she's not all that well known. So I'm really delighted of the opportunity to introduce her to you this morning. So she was born in about the year 1031 in Flanders. She was the daughter of Count Baldwin V, known as Baldwin the Magnificent, and his wife Adela, who was the daughter of the Queen of France. And she was described as being highly born. From the very moment, she was always described highly born Matilda, because she had impeccable pedigree. Not only as the daughter of this very prestigious Count of Flanders, but also of the French royal family. And her royal links went further than that, because she could actually trace her descent to Charlemagne, the 8th century Holy Roman Emperor, and also to Alfred the Great, shown there. So she had links to English royal heritage, and that would prove very, very useful to her future husband. There are actually no surviving likenesses of Matilda. It was said that she was very diminutive, that she was actually only 4 foot 2 inches tall. Well, that was actually thanks to a misrecording of her skeleton when it was excavated in Caen. But in fact, she was at most 5 feet tall. So she was quite a diminutive woman, and we know that her firstborn son was as well Robert, because he was nicknamed Curthose, which literally meant short trousers. She was a sort of, I don't know if I can say pocket rocket, but that's what I'm thinking. She was small, but she was formidable. And of course, she was a great prize in the international marriage market. And before William the Conqueror proposed marriage to Matilda, she'd already attracted a suitor in England, a powerful Saxon lord called Britrick. And it almost came to the point of marriage, and then Britrick got a better offer and decided to cancel his betrothal to Matilda. And let's just say he lived to regret that, because once Matilda was Queen of England, she made sure that he was thrown into prison and never came out alive. So this is the sort of woman we're talking about, real power behind the throne. So when William the Conqueror was proposed, of course, he wasn't William the Conqueror then, he was just William of Normandy. And by the way, you know, the illegitimate Duke, when he was proposed as a husband to Matilda, her first response was that she would not so far lower herself as to marry the base-born Duke of Normandy. When those words reached William's ears, he was none too pleased, because he had a pretty terrible temper as well. This is the man who, when besieging the town of Alençon in France, and the citizens of the town were being very stubborn and withholding the siege, when he finally managed to batter down the walls, he had all of those citizens rounded up and their hands and feet struck off as a punishment. So this is the sort of man Matilda's dealing with, but you know, she's more than a force to be reckoned with herself. So she rejects him. When he finds out, William gets on his horse, rides across the border to Flanders, where he finds Matilda on her way to chapel. And according to one chronicle, this is what happens next. He drags her through the mud by her long hair, and he beats her with fists, heels, and spurs. And what happens next? You can imagine Matilda, this very, very strong-willed character, she's just been, you know, violently abused by her would-be suitor. So you can imagine. Well, according to this same chronicle, she says, William must be a man of great courage and high daring to come and beat me in my own father's palace. I'll have none but him. Do we believe this chronicle? I have doubts myself. I think it says a lot about the chroniclers themselves and how really they thought that Matilda should have been punished for refusing William. I think we can be sure that she did refuse him. But this is how it's almost they wanted the scenario to run. So he takes his violent revenge and she says, oh gosh, so sorry, you're amazing, you've just beat me up and I will marry you. Whatever happened, Matilda did agree to the marriage, and it took place in about the year 1050. But we don't know precisely when, because actually they were marrying in defiance of a papal ban. because William and Matilda were actually related within the degrees of consanguinity, which frankly were hard to avoid. You know, you can go up to about your 16th cousin twice removed and it's still banned. So they hadn't waited for the Pope's permission when they got married probably in Bayeux, close to the border between Normandy and Flanders. And interestingly, the wedding clothes survived for a number of years in Bayeux, in the cathedral at Bayeux. And we know from that it was William who got all dressed up for the wedding. Matilda wore quite a simple gown, but William appeared in this quite lavish garment that was decorated with flowers and religious emblems and all silks and highly kind of decorated, really quite effeminate for this great warrior king. And I love the fact that he completed the ensemble with a helmet. So he's obviously been made to wear this quite lavish gown, but he insisted on walking down the aisle in his helmet in true warrior fashion. Well, Matilda proved a very popular Duchess of Normandy, which is perhaps because she was the only Duchess of Normandy in many decades. Previous dukes hadn't bothered to marry. And she was very popular, not least because she very quickly gave William heirs. She would have a total of 10, possibly 11 children, including those vital sons. Of course, it's all about the sons in history. And she had 4 living sons. Her firstborn, I've already mentioned, Robert, was undoubtedly her favourite, and they became very close as the years went on. And according to a contemporary chronicle, Matilda's fruitfulness in children excited in William's mind the tenderest regard for her. And it does seem that on William's part at least, this was a real love match. He came to absolutely worship the ground that Matilda walked on. It's less certain how she felt about him. I'll just leave it there. Well, in 1059, retrospectively, William and Matilda secured the Pope's permission to marry 9 years after they actually married, and they'd already had children by that stage. And to give thanks for this, they had the twin abbeys built in Caen of La Trinité, or Abbey aux Dames, on the left there, and Abbey aux Hommes, or Saint-Étienne, as it's known today, in Caen, to sort of give thanks for the Pope's blessing.